solutions that you have as funders might not be solutions that might apply to the situations that we have in the country.
Welcome to Social Situation, a podcast where we chat with and celebrate leaders challenging the status quo and creating innovations in social impact. Join us for conversations around the current and future state of social impact, the value of closing the gap between for-profits and nonprofits, and the importance of taking values-informed risks in order to create the greatest impact.
I'm Trevor Loke.
And I'm Erin Mogel.
And this is Social Situation. Welcome to Social Situation, Episode 8. In this episode, we'll be talking about international development and how nonprofits and funders can work together to achieve amazing impact. Joining us today from Malawi is Nyirenda of Rural Development Partners. They are a charity that's focused on the development of water and sanitation, food and agriculture, and sustainable services for the local population. And joining Daniel is their partner from Nexus Impacts, Moise. Nexus Impacts helps charities like Rural Development Partners get ready to receive funding from governments, foundations, and companies. And their work together has brought investment to Malawi and supported local implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Erin, welcome to the episode. I am excited to get into the discussion today on international development, which I know is an area of passion that you have extensive experience in. So just kicking it off, like you've worked in places like South Africa. Tell me, how did you get involved in this work and what have you done in international development?
Thanks, Trevor. I'm so excited to be here today, and I am thrilled to have Liam and Daniel on the podcast. I'm really excited to hear more about their work and the great impact that they're making, as well as learn about their really interesting partnership. So I know we'll be getting into that soon, but to your question, thank you. So first I can share a little bit about my work at that South African development organization, and then I'll kind of take us back a little bit, hopefully in brief. So I worked for an organization for about 5 years called Ubuntu Pathways. They support orphaned and vulnerable children in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. And specifically, everyone that they support is infected or affected by HIV/AIDS. And specifically, they provide a lot of different types of services and programs. They focus on providing health, education, and household support to all of these youngsters and their families. So they're really focused on supporting young people, at all stages of their lives, providing all of the resources that they need, not just to survive, but to truly thrive and to support the families that are taking care of them. So it was really wonderful to be a part of this organization. I was focused on all things fundraising and philanthropy. I know, Trevor, you and I have a lot of overlap in that space. And so I was focused on working with our donors and volunteers and community partners and corporate partners based out of our New York City office. I was tasked with planning and executing our annual gala, which was a lot of fun and brought in a significant portion of our annual operating budget. I also started our monthly giving program and worked with high school and college age students that wanted to get involved in our work, as well as young professionals in the New York area. So as you can appreciate, having worked in nonprofit yourself, I wore a lot of hats and really got to dip my toe in the water into all things kind of fundraising and marketing, branding related, anything having to do with increasing awareness around the organization and raising funds. And I was able to spend about a month in South Africa to really understand the context of our work and get to meet both my colleagues down there as well as our beneficiaries and see the communities in which these young people were growing up. And it was just a really eye-opening experience for me, having never traveled to South Africa before, and of course helped me in my work, not just of course to continue to be motivated, but to really be able to speak to our donors and supporters about why we were doing the work we were doing and how impactful their support was. So to kind of take you back a bit, I've always been interested in international issues. I had the opportunity to live with my family in London when I was, ages 12 through 14, and attended an international school with young people from over 60 countries. So I feel like from a young age, my mind was kind of opened up to different cultures and backgrounds and ways of life. And personally, I've always been committed to, I should say I've always wanted to change the world, as cliche and cheesy as that sounds. I think little Erin thought, she was going to make it happen. I've realized as I've gotten older that there's a lot of work to be done, but together in community with many, many others, I feel we can truly affect a lot of change. But that's been a common thread throughout my childhood and my career. I led the community service club in high school and the human rights club in college, and then ended up kind of taking those passions and making them a career for myself. I think I kind of fell into international development after doing my master's in human rights. And I'm so glad I did, because the work was truly impactful. And I woke up every day feeling like the work I was doing was making an impact. And again, going to South Africa and really seeing the impact of the oftentimes challenging fundraising work I was doing really made a big difference for me. And of course, it was great to see the difference it was making in the community. So anyway, I will stop there, Trevor, but I would love to hear about you. I know that you've also worked across the international nonprofit space, including at Transparency International. And I'm wondering if you can share more about how you got into international nonprofit work and what your experience was like working in that sector.
Yeah, my experience is definitely not as extensive as yours, Erin, but I have a real passion for it. That is, probably as big as yours is, for sure. Hearing you talk about it, it's the first time I got involved with international development was through Transparency International as a consultant, and they were facing a challenge. This similar, you described the fundraising rules that Ubuntu needed in order to raise their dollars, and Transparency International was trying to figure out how they could raise funding while maintaining their integrity and their value system, which was so core to who they are. Obviously, they show up transparencies in the name, so the slightest hint of corruption or conflict just can't even be present at all. And so, our particular challenge is how do we create a set of policies and a process that allows the organization and its stakeholders to feel confident about who they're working with, and that the funding that is received is going to be able to go to highly impactful areas that fight corruption and journalism without having strings attached. So that was kind of my first role there, and yeah, I was able to go to Germany, which was really cool to be able to work with them and present our findings on the research that was done. But the next opportunity I had was really through One Girl Can, their work in Kenya, working with high school students and early university students to help them find their entrepreneurial skill sets, build their careers, set job paths for themselves that can break them out of their economic isolation and oppression that they're facing. A lot of them are coming from shanty towns and villages with very little opportunity. And so One Girl Can is showed me how their process goes in and helps the girls and young women on the ground be empowered through the community that they're building there, which I'm very supportive of. So that's kind of what I've been able to see in terms of my work. Additionally working with different funding partners who are interested in emerging geographies and areas that they're connected to historically, family foundations, for example, that come from particular countries. I've had some exposure to that work, but what I've learned internationally, I think I've been able to apply most importantly at home. And, working with, Indigenous communities in Canada, realizing that best practices don't just exist in one geography or place, and that the needs of people are very, very unique, depending on the challenges that they're facing, but that there are innovative models for how we work with community, how we fundraise, how we implement funding that can empower communities to set visions for themselves, achieve those visions and then build on them. So I think that's been the what I've been able to bring into my work from the international development experience that I've had, as limited as it is. So yeah, absolutely very interested to learn more about our guests today and more from you, Erin, about how international development is shaping up and how we can take more of these global lessons and apply them locally. Have you, kind of experienced that as well? I know, a lot of your work is domestic as well. Are you taking international lessons and applying that locally?
Absolutely, Trevor. And thank you so much for sharing about your experience. I feel like every conversation we have, I just learn more and more about you. So I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, definitely, that really stood out when you were saying that, what you've learned internationally, you've been able to apply at home. And I think the same goes for me. When I was at Ubuntu, one of the mottos there, I should say, was should your birthplace determine your future? And we talked a lot about how we don't get to choose the circumstances that we're born into, but we all deserve and need the same things, right? Baseline health, education, safety, love, support. And so I think that's a message that's really stuck with me since I worked at Ubuntu and will forever stick with me. I feel incredibly privileged to have grown up in the circumstances I grew up in, but it could have been very different. And so my work is focused on impact and how can we ensure that everyone globally, has access to these things that they need and deserve, and that there's an element of equity kind of focused on in everything that we do. That thread of, we can't choose what we're born into, but we can help to ensure that other people gain access to really important resources they need is something so important that's stuck with me since my days of working in international development. And I'm curious, Trevor, what has that been like for you? Have you had any major aha moments or takeaways that stick with you to this day since your work in the international development space?
Well, I think it's just the more that I travel, the more I realize how similar we are and how we have, similar ambitions as human beings and anxieties and fears. And, I think that reminder is really, really important because, again, we can be so divided in this world today. We can find reasons to not get along and to, have, wedge between us what our differences are and differences of opinions. But we all live in this ecosystem on this planet. We have to ultimately get along for our own sakes and for the sakes of future generations. So, the more I realize what we have in common, the more I think about, how can we create systems that work for everybody? And I think that's just what stays with me. So, Erin, really appreciate that question. Love this conversation. And I think we're going to get into a really good discussion with Daniel and Liam as we come back shortly. So, stay with us.
Looking to make an impact, but not sure where to start? Elevate Social Impact, a purpose-driven consulting and coaching practice, helps companies develop their CSR strategies and embed a culture of giving back into their brand. And they guide individuals looking for fulfilling careers in social impact. Whether you're wanting to grow your company's give back efforts or find values alignment and make a greater difference through your work, Elevate Social Impact is excited to equip you with the knowledge, resources, and tools that you need to get started. Check out elevatesocialimpact.com today to learn more. Welcome to Social Situation. We are honored to have Daniel Nyirenda and Liam Moise joining us today. Daniel is the Executive Director of Rural Development Partners, a Malawi-based NGO focused on water sanitation and hygiene, agriculture and food security, and housing. Liam is the founder and CEO of Nexus Impacts, working with NGOs like Rural Development Partners to catalyze donor dollars into emerging high-impact projects. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having us on this program.
Yeah, thank you, Erin.
Liam, it is great to see you again. Nexus Impacts is a partner of Orgmatch, and Liam and I have connected a few times. So really appreciate you joining us on the show today. I've really enjoyed learning about the model that you've created around partnerships that are focused on moving capital into impact. Can you describe how Nexus Impacts works with your NGO partners to get projects off the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. And so everything's based off of two foundations. One is we need to make sure we're meeting the needs of corporations. So that includes different areas of risk management, accountability, and so on. And the other component is we ensure that the initiatives we're working with are indeed sustainable. So that second component essentially gets answered by a final question of if us, Nexus Impacts, and our NGO partner no longer existed tomorrow, are the beneficiaries worse off or better off? So in short, are we creating opportunity or dependency?
Thank you so much for sharing, Liam. It's great to get kind of that overview of, how you work with NGO partners. And I'd love to turn it to you for a second here, Daniel. Thank you so much again for joining us. We're so glad to have you here. You lead Rural Development Partners in Malawi, a partner organization of Nexus Impacts. And we're going to dive into that relationship today and hear a little bit more about your synergies and how you really work closely together. But Daniel, at first, I'm wondering if you can tell our audience about the work that you do. If you could share more about kind of what your focus is and what sort of an impact you're having in your community.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin. As Rural Development Partners, we are a local NGO based in the northern part of Malawi. And our focus is actually working with marginalized people or communities with interventions that are aimed at improving their livelihoods. So as a country, we have local councils or local government that are able to do an analysis of their area, where they'll be able to tell you the main factors that affecting people in that area. So as Rural Development Partners, we take those issues and look at how we can address some of them. We cannot address all of them, but we can address those things that are in line with our vision. So for us, we look at issues of food, issues of agriculture, issues of water as our main focus areas. So what we do as Rural Development Partners is we go in an area. For example, we have different areas within our community. But what we do is we go in an area and assess the needs of that area. So you'd find that most of the needs lie around food, water, hygiene, health. So that's what we focus on. And then under those thematic areas, we do capacity building, we do sensitization, and implementation of things that need to be done in those areas so that people can move from one step to the other. So in terms of our focus areas, we normally focus on issues of water, sanitation, and hygiene. So under that aspect, what we do is we help communities with access to water. So we do drilling of boreholes. And with the policy direction of the ministry now, we are doing reticulation. So there are already boreholes that are existing, but would work on putting a submersible pump using solar energy to pump water into a tank that will distribute the water into pipes. And then we'll do water filtration because the water most of the time is not safe to drink. So we encourage people to filter their water. We provide filters at a subsidy price and help people to have safe water. And then we have agriculture and food security. We're training people on new farming techniques, which encourage conservation of the environment, conservation of water, and all those things. Then we also have environmental management program where we are actually promoting reforestation of the environment. People have cut down a lot of trees for charcoal and other things, but we're promoting reforestation. And we're also doing an early childhood development program where we're training caregivers on how they can, teach the young kids how they can, grow and have knowledge in terms of education. So pretty much those are the main things that we're focusing on. And our partnership with Nexus Impact has been very commendable. So I'll look at that in terms of how we met and what Nexus Impact does before partnering, and also maybe what Nexus Impact does after the partnership. And lastly, maybe what we find interesting in the partnership. So quickly on that one, I'll just say I met Liam through his professor. So I work with other organizations that do, for example, washing healthcare facilities, a program where we are implementing washing healthcare facilities. So I met the professor, and then he introduced me to Liam, and then Liam came, did due diligence for the organization. So normally what Nexus Impact does is they'll come to the organization, they want to know just everything about what you do. So you don't hide anything. You give your bank accounts, your bank statements. He goes into all those and just sees how you deal with, managing funds from donors and all those. And then after that, you work on, you prepare things that he needs for him to make reports. Because as Nexus impacts, they want to make sure that they report to whoever gives funds to they want to report to them, and then he wants to make sure that you are providing necessary information so that the reports that he gives are valid and are also up to date. And then after that, you follow up with just making sure that everything is in line and all those things. So what we find interesting about the partnership with Nexus Impact is that they focus on tracking. So, when donors give funds, they would want to find out what their funds are doing. And, so Nexus Impacts will give you a very good tracking tool where they would, follow up on everything. Every dollar that they comes to the organization is going to be followed up because there's a good tracking tool. And also it helps, for example, for me, it helps with getting organized. I'm someone who's, dealing with different kinds of partners or donors. You need to put yourself in good books. And then, what Liam has done has helped me to get organized because it does all the paperwork for you. Like, these are the folders, these are the documents you need to use. These are the tools that you need to use for you to input data. So all those things that Nexus Impact does are very, very, very influential, and they help us as an organization. So maybe in brief, that's what I can say about what we do and our partnership with Nexus Impact.
Liam, so I have another question for you. I would love to hear what role transparency, tracking, and impact verification play and how Nexus Impacts operates.
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, one of the pillars is ensuring that we meet the needs of corporations. So tracking and transparency is the foundation of that. Donors want to be able to know exactly where their money is going. So these systems we implement make it so corporations will know the impact of every single dollar spent. And we're confident enough in these systems, Nexus Impacts actually will contractually guarantee the primary impact that occurs. So what this means is corporations can have confidence in their marketing aspects. So an example right now, Lululemon's actually going through a bit of a hiccup because some of their marketing was quite different than the reality of what happened with their environmental goals. So if Lululemon or other organizations has these different social or environmental objectives and they go through us, we contractually guarantee the primary impact and are liable for false advertising and so on from the numbers we give them. So this system brings a lot of confidence and supports the risk management for donors to ensure that their money is actually going to where they say, and they don't get any negative repercussions from a misuse or inappropriate use of funds because we're able to track every single dollar spent.
That is so impressive and so important, especially as donors, think about where they are going to give their funds, especially, donors that are, really, really committing to generous contributions and are really committed to the cause to see that, their money is going where you say it is and that there's a guarantee. I think that's really innovative and really sets you all apart. And I'm wondering, Liam, how do you ensure these measures and communicate them to your stakeholders?
So what it comes down to is it's one thing to be able to track, but it's another thing to be able to verify. So our systems is we can actually go back and verify what's been occurred. So if there are any claims or aspects where people are doubting what's happened, they can go through us because we're the third party managing it. And we can go into our database where there's a pile of evidence to support these impacts. Now, in regards to communicating it, our system is on a quarterly basis. So every quarter we provide an impact certificate and an impact report, which is signed off by both Nexus Impacts and our partnered NGO. So in this case with Daniel Nyirenda with RDP. So in the contract, that information that gets signed off, we're liable for the authenticity of it. So they get new numbers every quarter, which they get to use in their marketing and so on.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that model. Really, really impressive. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Daniel. It's really interesting to hear about your work, and I really appreciate kind of the wraparound services that you provide. And what really stood out is the emphasis that you put on assessing the needs of your community. I think, having myself worked in the development sector for many years, there are so many different approaches to successfully supporting communities, and it sounds like you all do it just right in terms of taking the time to listen to the needs of your community and addressing those needs from different angles and providing a multitude of services that support all members of the community at different stages of their lives and, according to different needs that they have. And also loved hearing about your really strong partnership, of course, with Nexus Impacts and, Liam, great to hear about your model and focus on transparency and due diligence and really supporting your partners in providing them with the tools that they need to continue to carry out their work in the most effective way possible. And Liam, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to the partnership from your perspective, what that looks like, from where you sit, and also how you kind of scope and identify organizations that you're going to support, because of course there's so many organizations out there doing impactful work. So I'm curious what your process is of kind of drilling down those lists and finding the right partnerships that will push forward your mission, but also organizations that you deem as doing really, really good, impactful work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Erin. So to answer that question, there's a few stages to it. Some context to know is within the industry, it's quite a tight network. There's a lot of people that are focusing on helping each other and causing a greater good. So that has a very unique network, as I'm sure you both understand. With that, within that network, a lot of people know which groups are authentic and actually making real effective change, and the ones that aren't. So fortunately, Nexus Impacts has developed a fantastic network of extremely experienced individuals and groups that are involved in these projects. So they're very good at guiding us in the right direction to find effective partners to support their initiatives and take it to the next step. So one thing to clarify is Nexus Impacts doesn't create the initiative. We work with groups that already are active in an initiative, and then we support optimizing, making it more sustainable, transparent, accountable, and so on. So Daniel touched on it there a bit, but one of our most important steps of this process is verifying the authenticity of different charities and NGOs we work with. So as Daniel mentioned, we get 100% transparency of their operations. So that includes other banking, financial statements, and even if there's anything fishy, we get to see their own personal financial statements. This has been a fantastic deterrent for organizations that are not authentic and ones that are. Daniel's actually seen firsthand another group that approached Nexus Impacts when we're on the ground. And we do that first stage, we introduce the idea, and we tell them the very first step is 100% transparency. And if you get a no or an excuse, there's always a reason why.
That's really helpful to understand, Liam. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I can definitely see how that is a deterrent, but also helps you to find the organizations that best match your values and your goals, and that, like you said, are doing that really impactful work and doing it well and are committed to the process, right? You all put a lot of time and energy and effort into these partnerships. So making sure that it is synergistic and that you are looking, short-term and long-term at the same goals, as your partners, I think is really helpful in making the most effective and long-lasting change. So appreciate you sharing about your model and commend you on the process that you've created. That's great.
Yeah, and absolutely. And one thing in particular that aligns well with rural development partners and us. So just context for the viewers. We work with a variety of charities. to create a portfolio of impacts. But Rural Development Partners is quite unique in not just their understanding, but their application of making these initiatives sustainable. So falling a bit back on one of the projects Daniel's discussed is putting in boreholes and wells. So as we can all imagine, having a well in your community is an amazing thing, especially if the alternative is you're walking miles to a dirty river. Now, in application, if you give a community that doesn't have education or financial management skills, or has cohesion in operations in a fashion that's the standard of maintaining a well, quite quickly you're going to run into some maintenance issues. And if you don't have a team and a network with the knowledge of how to manage those, and do preventative maintenance and preventative or preemptive fund allocation, well, your well is not going to last very long. And then the community is back down to square one. So this is where we align on one of our pillars of sustainability. Daniel actually ensures not just the standard, the legal standard of training is met, they go further and really develop a community and a committee around being self-sufficient in managing their own well. And to clarify, this isn't just unique to this project. This is with all the projects they do. It's all focused around independence and opportunity and self-sufficiency.
Yeah, I love that, Liam. It sounds like a lot of this work too is, being able to translate what's happening on the ground into, language and data that funders can really understand and have confidence in to be able to move that capital. And, Daniel, thinking about, bringing people in, especially folks from outside where you're based in Malawi, I know you've got European funders, for instance. How are you helping them to understand some of that work that they can't just see on paper? When there's cultural considerations coming into what is probably a new country for a lot of folks in terms of their professional experience, how do you help, bring them into your space and help them understand what's going on?
Thank you so much, Trevor. Before I answer your question, I just want to echo what Liam said about Nexus impacts. I think the most important thing is that, and that's what is unique about Nexus impacts, is they come to your organization and they don't want to bring to you what they think should be done, but they'll work with you and just look at what you're doing and then support what you're doing. But they'll make sure that whatever you're doing should be improved in such a way that it's done, to the dot. So I think that's what I wanted to say about the uniqueness of Nexus impacts. So they'll come to your organization, this is what you're doing, and then let's look at all the interventions they're doing, and then they'll say, okay, maybe from our side, we should be able to support these and these interventions. So I wanted to echo what Liam said. And coming to your question on how do I introduce people to our work? I think for me, I believe in, letting people see by themselves and, doing less of the talking. So for me, what I do is I take them to visit our project areas so that they see what we're doing on the ground, and also they meet the people that we are serving. So that's the first step that I take. I take them to where you're working. They meet the people you are serving. They meet the people you're working with. So it's just an open concept where I would allow you to meet my members of staff and the people that we're serving. So from them, you'll be able to get the true stories. You'll be able to get what's on the ground exactly.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate that. It kind of underlines what Liam was saying before around, full transparency as the first step, really sounds very similar for your approach is, just, see the work, as it is. And so, we have, funder organizations listening to this podcast. And I guess my question for you next, Daniel, is, what would you like funders who are listening or considering working in places like Malawi, especially on development projects, to know before engaging in the work or before engaging with organizations like yours?
Thank you very much. I think one thing that I can mention is that funders have got their own interests, and based on some funders are like personal, some funders are big institutions that don't have personal attachments. But what I can advise is funders need to understand that when they come to a country like Malawi, we have our own needs and we have our own challenges. So it's important to understand that solutions that you have as funders might not be solutions that might apply to the situations that we have in the country. So most of the times I like to take the role of just breaking down the needs and the issues in the communities that we serve to the funders, so they understand what issues or challenges we have as a society, so that when they are thinking of supporting interventions in Malawi, they should be able to understand that interventions are best known by those people that are facing the challenges. So I think that's what I look at most of the times, and that's what I guide and advise funders.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Daniel. And I just really want to highlight what you just said. I think that's so important for our listeners, especially for folks who might be new to this sort of work, to listen to the people on the ground, to listen to the people who know the communities better than anyone else does. Of course, funders can have an incredible impact, with the resources they can provide. But, most importantly, listening to the communities that are facing these challenges, day in and day out, to really make sure that the funding is going to the greatest needs of the community and that there's alignment there. So thank you so much for highlighting that for all of us. And Liam, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit here, because as we've been talking, I've been so impressed by the Nexus Impacts model and your focus on transparency and really on tracking, and how you find really strong partnerships with organizations that are doing the hard work and really are impacting and changing communities. But it got me thinking about your origin story as a founder. Trevor and I love having founders on the podcast and hearing how these amazing organizations kind of come to fruition. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got Nexus started, if there was an aha moment or an experience you had, or kind of what was the impetus for your creating this incredible organization.
Thanks for the question, Erin. So there's a short version and a long version, but I'll just go over a couple of the key aspects that brought us to where we are. So I used to live very much a pleasure-seeking life in regards to the amount of effort and time I spent with different sports I used to be involved with. And I devoted a career towards that side of things. Fortunately enough, I was very successful at a young age, where I got beyond where I expected I could have early on. And in that moment, it hit me rather hard that I'm not living a purpose-driven life. And even though arguably I had the most fun job in the world, which was being a helicopter mountain bike guide, there was a lack of tangible meaning and drive behind what I was doing. That in combination, and you can recognize this too, Trevor, being in Vancouver, is the lack of snowfall we get in the winters and the amount of fires in the summers. Certain environmental degradation and climate change was rather hard to see. And I have little to no faith in government bodies to actually make tangible change. So personal observation, which I'm sure others can dive into, and just recognize the truth of this much more than I even understand myself, is that short-term economic gain is one of the leading contributors to some of these environmental or social challenges. So to me, the solution had to be, if you can help organizations make more money, and the byproduct of that was supporting the environment or people, then you actually have a lasting, tangible solution. Now, that solution on paper is great because for people who don't care about the environment or people, their desire for wealth is going to support them. And for people that do care, now they get to actually grow their businesses in a way that they know people on the planet are benefiting. So at the time, I didn't know how to go about this. I went back into school, did a sustainable business degree. Then following that, worked in the industry for a bit, worked with a company called Plastic Bank. They're doing amazing stuff with essentially turning plastic waste into a currency to help impoverished groups and have more of a circulating system with waste. And from that work experience and education, the idea of Nexus Impacts came about, where creating a network that economic, or rather social and planetary well-being is fueling economic gain.
Thanks for going over that, Liam. That's really helpful to clarify, especially when we're going into like the details of how you're helping. And I think at a zoomed out level, you're creating this circular system of, I like to think of it as like a positive feedback loop, right? And I talk to my own clients in the same way, obviously focused on delivering different service and jobs for them. But I think when we're in this ecosystem, the part we're all playing here is like, how do we help make what you've just described a reality? And what are we pulling from and able to do that? So, just continuing on that note, I find that in order to be a good leader in business, I have to recharge my batteries outside of work. And I know that you both spending time outside. Liam, you just talked about your background in sports. So I'm wondering about how you both stay active outside of your work, and the importance of that for when you do show up to be the leaders you need to be to make the impact. So maybe Liam, let's start with you.
Yeah. So one thing that's very beneficial, which I touched on a bit, is this field of work is very much of a purpose-driven life. And that alone has, rather than trying to push the motivation to go do what we're doing, it's very much of a pull. So with this career, I've been able to work much longer hours, and Daniel can testify to that. Work much longer hours in various avenues and not get burnt out, because you directly see the benefit to these people. Now, on the other side, sports and activities are very important. So when I'm on the ground, I don't necessarily have all that from back home, my friends and connections and family, but making good connections and meeting good people on the ground has been vital for that. And touching back on what I mentioned earlier in this discussion is this network of people are very good people that are trying to support others. So it very quickly feels like a home away from home. And that alone is great for recharging.
Oh, thanks, Liam. And Daniel, same question over to you. I learned just before this call that you have a motorcycle, which piqued my interest. I'd love to hear how that shows up for you in recharging your batteries.
Thank you so much, Trevor. So for me, I think I just advise on issues to do with like exchanging numbers. I won't say this you cannot do, this you can't do, or this you can do, but I just advise you on the risks of all those things. And coming to your question on recharging your batteries, I consider good health as the first capital, because in any business you need to have capital. And good health is the first thing that you need to have, because you can have the resources, you can have the money, you can have everything that you need for a business. But if your health is not in good shape, then all those things are useless. So basically for me, I enjoy working out. I'm not an endurance person like Liam is. Liam does endurance kind of exercises, but I'm more of a strength guy. So I have equipment at home and at the office that I work on, so lifts and all those things. But I also take motorcycle riding as one of the things that, refreshes my mind. So going on just long drives along the road, takes you off from the busy things that go into your mind, but will just make you refresh and revitalize. So when Liam was here, we took a couple of rides together, go mountain biking, not biking, but motorcycle riding, and Liam was very good at navigating the obstacles and all those. They're actually routes that it took me to that I didn't know of, but I've lived in this area for like over 10 years. But when Liam came, he had already navigated all those places, and I was able to show me. So it was quite nice for us to connect, and then just meet and have similar kind of things that we like doing. It was interesting. But one thing that I wanted to share was on our ride to Livingstonia. That's a mountain on the plateau on top. There was a time that I almost died. Liam saw me like almost die because there was a car that was coming, like a mini bus that was coming in my direction, and it was a swift move that I took to avoid the head-on collision. I think Liam had a better picture, but I also had, depending on our roads, because our roads have got a lot of potholes, so you find oncoming traffic trying to avoid the pothole, you want to avoid the pothole, and then you end up in the same lane. So, but all those things help you just refresh from the busy things that you're thinking about in terms of work, and then make you, reset restart your brain or all those things. So yeah, that's what I can say.
We often ask this question of our guests and we get all different types of responses. And I saw a common thread between good health and strong relationships. And I think that's the basis, of course, for, a good well-being outside of work, for, leaders like yourself, being able to continue on the challenging work that you do, but also the basis for a really strong partnership. So it was great to hear common threads between what you both shared. And kind of keeping on that note, we have one last question for you. Our time together has gone quickly today, but I would love to hear about the legacy that you each aim to leave behind. So, Daniel, I'll start with you. In 10 years, what will we think of when we hear your name, or what do you hope people will think of when they hear your name?
As someone who started an NGO that targets marginalized people, communities, and seeks to help people move from their condition to a better state. I think the legacy that I would love to leave is, Daniel was someone who started an NGO to help people from the communities that he serves. And that he grew a small NGO into a big NGO that had large impacts, or more impacts than what was initially started, and that he empowered youth, especially the people that we've served, and also my workmates. Because one thing that I've even told Liam is 5 years from now, I don't want to be heading this organization. I want someone that I've mentored to take up the organization and then take it to another level. So my vision has been to also mentor, my personal vision has been to mentor people that I work with, so that they take up the organization and grow it to bigger heights. So that's one of the things that I've wanted to leave as a legacy. And also that what we've done as an organization have had sustainable development that could be tracked from when we started and up to years to come. I don't want something that would end when I say, okay, maybe I'm retiring, or I'm taking leave, and then it ends there. I want something that is going to be sustained, and people are going to say this was started a long time ago, and it's still continuing in helping people develop. And lastly, being a family man, I didn't mention this, but I have a wife and 3 kids. I also want to be remembered as a dad who was loving and caring, even in the midst of busy, commitments that have been there for work, but also that I've been someone who's been able to be there for my family, provide support, and just love the family and all those things. So I think that's what I would say as legacy that I want to leave. Thanks.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing your story with us today. I think that's a wonderful legacy that you wish to leave behind. And Liam, I'd love to hear the same from you, please.
Absolutely. So my big target is to bring accountability to the side of NGOs and charities. If we're able to increase the standard of the understanding of where donors' money is going towards these programs, not only will that in the moment prevent different misuse of funds, in the big picture, it's going to bring more confidence for organizations and individuals to get involved with these programs and not have as much of a concern of scandals. And that concept, that trust, that faith in these systems alone, if we get to the scale I'd like to see, even outside of the direct involvement of Nexus impacts, will have tremendous compounding impacts and externalities.
That's great. You are already, making such an incredible impact, and I'm excited to see all that you continue to do in your career, both of you. It's just been really incredible hearing about the work and this really strong partnership that you have. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us today.
Well, thank you, Daniel and Liam, for joining us. Daniel Nyirenda is the Executive Director of Rural Development Partners. You can check them out at ruraldp.org. And Liam Moise is the founder and CEO of Nexus Impacts. You can check them out at nexusimpacts.com. Thank you both for joining us for the great conversation today. It was really, really insightful. And to our listeners, we will be right back. $60 billion is being given by companies to nonprofits in 2024 to maximize regulatory benefits and manage reputation for employees and customers. Some companies are struggling. The rest are using Orgmatch because Orgmatch optimizes this process, saving time and money required in due diligence, research, and administration, while increasing confidence in the impact and investment earned. That's why community investment teams around the world are trusting Orgmatch to get the job done. Find out for yourself by going to orgmatch.com. That's orgmatch.com to get started now for free.
Welcome back. It's time for us to share what's on our mind. Trevor, I would love to hear what's been on your mind lately.
So, Erin, kind of on the theme of our episode today of unlikely partnerships, I think the thing that I'm thinking about most is meeting new people. I've been going to different events over the past few weeks, professional networking events, peer events, industry events, and I've just been meeting some really interesting people working on cool projects. And that has inspired me. It's fueled my creativity. It's given me motivation. It's, made me rethink my own business and work. And I've, started exploring some unlikely partnerships with people. And that's kind of the message I wanted to leave our listeners with today is think about, can you get out to an event or a space that you're not usually at to meet new interesting people, maybe around an interest area you have, and maybe think about what kind of partnership or way of working with people that might come about for you if there's something that makes sense. I think about our case, Erin, where, you and I are now doing this podcast together. And I mean, a few years ago, we didn't know each other at all. And, we live in different places, but, we're still able to make a really cool partnership work. And I would, have our listeners think about maybe is there a way that they can do that for themselves by unlocking a partnership with a perfect stranger.
I love that so much, Trevor. I believe in that so much. It's not always easy to get ourselves out to those events or put ourselves in maybe uncomfortable networking, positions, or to get up that energy to go out and socialize with new folks. But I feel it is so beneficial, and you never know where those unlikely partnerships will come from. It reminds me of a few years ago, so not necessarily at an event, but I was working out of a WeWork for a nonprofit, and we were looking for corporate partners for one of our upcoming events. And I happened to kind of get chatting and hit it off with a woman that worked down the hallway at a new startup. And we just kind of organically started chatting about our work in very different spaces. And lo and behold, a few months later, her company became one of our corporate sponsors. And then, we really just stayed connected on the synergies between our work, for a long time to come. So, like you said, you never know where you'll meet those people that help to form those unlikely partnerships. And it could just be down the hall from you. It could be at an event. It could be, at an online networking event or what have you. There's so many different opportunities. So thank you for encouraging all of us to maybe get outside of our comfort zone and put ourselves out there.
Yeah, no, 100%, Erin. I think we tend to default to who we know, which, because, we want to be able to trust who we work with. And I think that's a totally reasonable thing. But I think we should be able to trust that there are a lot of people we don't know who are going to make great partners too. And, let's definitely foster the relationships we have with the people we love, but let's not be afraid of thinking about who else we can meet and bring into our circles. So with that being said, Erin, really would love to hear what you've been thinking about and wanted to share today.
Yeah, totally. So this is, we could say along similar lines, but a little bit different. So I have been watching the new Netflix show called Unlocked, a jail experiment. I don't know if you've seen this one yet, Trevor, but it's basically about a max security prison in, I believe, Arkansas. And it focuses on one specific unit of the prison where the inmates get 1 hour outside of their cells per day. They call it 23 and 1. So 23 hours a day, they're in their cell with their cellmate, and 1 hour of the day, they're out for free time, which, as you can appreciate, really has an impact on, their mental state, their, entire well-being, really. I can't even imagine, but it doesn't sound like it's positive. And so the sheriff there decides to try this experiment where the men are basically allowed to be out of their cell at all times of the day. But with that, the guards are also outside of their unit, of course, looking in via security cameras for safety purposes. But it really puts the onus on the inmates to figure out how to build and sustain community. And you might be wondering, okay, Erin's trying to make a parallel between a max security prison and building community in the social impact space, but I promise you, there were a lot of lessons learned. So it was really interesting to see these men kind of forced into building community, especially when they came from rival gangs. And a lot of times violence was the way in which they communicated in the past, but they all kind of know the stakes are high, knowing that if they don't get along and figure out how to form this community, that they're going to be back in that 23 and 1 setup. So I was really inspired to see how they learn to communicate, with their words instead of their physical actions, how they learn to find understanding. They've all committed pretty serious crimes, and many of them, if not all of them, have very difficult backgrounds. So understanding where each other comes from, finding that kind of mutual ground upon which they can connect. They learn to respect one another. They really learn to overcome and embrace their differences. And, that's just a short list of what I took away. But I was really, I would pause sometimes watching the show and was really inspired to see how community can be formed in the most unlikely of places. And it inspired me to really think about how I build community and what the tenets are of building a strong and successful and sustained community with those around me. So you never know, just like you said, unlikely partnerships. Maybe this is an unlikely learning. You never know where you're going to learn how to build community, from, but certainly this Netflix show has taught me a lot about how I can really strengthen communities around me and build stronger communities for myself.
Very cool. I have not seen the show, although I've flipped by and added it to my list on Netflix. It's making me think a lot. This is a really complex issue, but I mean, we know for sure that a lot of people get out of prison and reoffend, and we know that, criminals start from a place of distrust because they've broken public trust for fair reason. But you have to think, if we're not giving people an opportunity to rebuild that trust, the default, of course, is going to be for them to go back into society without that trust being rebuilt and for them to reoffend. So I love what you're saying around building community, giving people a chance, and also recognizing these are human beings. I think, anybody being locked up for that amount of time is, in my opinion, inhumane. And we have to start thinking about how do we start giving people some humanity back who don't have a lot of it or have lost all of it. And in doing that, can we actually improve the recidivism that exists among repeat offenders and those people who are caught up in a criminal / prison industrial complex that rely on one another to sustain the system. So I think anything we can do to break that and reform these channels, these existing ways of being, it's fine by me. I'm very open to it. And yeah, really appreciate your suggestions today, Erin. That's a very, very cool recommendation.
Absolutely, Trevor. And yeah, I think that is totally spot on. I mean, I realized I didn't get to kind of the end goal of why this program was put into place, but that's exactly it. How can we reduce recidivism? How can we instill more of a sense of humanity into these humans that deserve it, right? So definitely a lot of takeaways there. And, it just reminds me of the importance of remembering that we are all human, we all have needs, we all deserve love and support and resources. And, I think that we have definitely seen, of course, from our conversation about all things international development with Daniel and Liam, just reminding us that, no matter what circumstances we're born into or what experiences we face or endure, we are all human. We all crave connection and community, and we can all do more to support one another. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that too, Trevor. I really appreciate it. Social Situation is co-hosted by me, Erin Mogel, the amazing Trevor Loke, and presented by Elevate Social Impact and Orgmatch. Editing is by Tristan Thomson. New episodes are released on the second Thursday of each month. Visit socialsituationpodcast.com to learn more or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.